center, and the local calls, we tell people to either call after 8 o'clock in the morning, we're open 8 to midnight, or to call the NSPL and talk to someone in St. Louis. So that's where we are right now, but the attitude is very optimistic. I'm looking forward to us getting on a solid funding foundation, and I'll answer any questions. Yeah, see here.
Yeah, Steve, maybe I misunderstood, but I thought you said when you were talking to Craig, Wynug, Nancy, Don and Mike on, that you were told that there were plenty of county mental health dollars. Did you say that, or did...
I've been told that the state distributes mental health dollars to the counties, not the cities.
And then that there's plenty? And
Pardon?
that we have enough in Douglas County that the mental health...
I don't have a number on it. I don't know what the dollar amount is, but there is mental health money.
Right, it goes to the county, but I thought the county had always run out of them, like...
I don't know, I haven't got, that's just
Okay,
what I
thank you.
heard. Yep.
Yeah, I've been a volunteer 2 different times at headquarters. As far as I know from the history, headquarters began not as a crash pad, but the graduate students in the pharmacy department at KU in the 60s.
Right.
The pharmacy graduate students began a program where they would test drugs to see what was in it, make sure they're pure and not going to cause harm to people who took them. A friend of mine back then at 9th in Indiana had smoked some marijuana, and he told me that the result was he laid on the couch and couldn't move for several hours. So I took that baggie up to headquarters. At the time, it was in a big house, you know, on Mississippi Street across from the stadium. Took it up there, and there was a guy there in a chair, and I said, by the way, I want to have this looked at. He took it from me and put it on the floor beside the chair. I left and came back a week later and asked about it, and nobody had any idea what happened. I was on the overnight shifts often because I was either a student or didn't have anything to do, and I also was regular overnight shift, and I remember one particular midnight New Year's Eve getting a call from a woman who was going to kill herself. So we did that. And the training he talks about is very good. At one point, you could put it on your resume because it was so intensive and so good, it could go on your resume. I was at the headquarters when it was on 17th and Mass on the southeast corner in the building that's still there. I was there when it was across from Central Junior High. And then it moved to where it is now, and so they don't have any crash. We have crash pads. We let people sleep there if they weren't drunk or whatever. But now it's downtown with none of that. It's located in the same building with...
It's the old Charlton Manley building, 211
Manley,
East 8th.
the same building with manpower. It's in the basement in the back.
Right.
You ring the bell at night. Now, what I was going to say was, I've known Marcia for a long time, the director, the former director, Marcia Epstein. And back in December, that we had a big party for her. When all this turmoil was going on, all the ex-headquarters people got on the internet and had this thing organized, and were really upset and had this big party for her out there at Johnny's across from the river, and food and drink and stuff, and they had videos, all of this stuff. And the story we heard, which perhaps Steve cannot talk about, was that she had been in Salina that day when they basically said, by the way, you're fired. And apparently what we heard was that she came back and they wouldn't let her in to get her stuff out, even her keys to her house, which apparently she had the second copy of. I don't know if you can talk about that, but it was part of the system, and it sounds like what you're doing now is wonderful, and I can see what the point was in what you're saying. It seems as if Marcia was a very strong person and very well known and respected, and I guess what you're saying is she was the top and not flat.
The only one thing I will say, because I was not a part of the board, and I've never seen her evaluation of a motion or what the board did. I can say that my second day on the job was to supervise her removing her personal effects from the office. A Sunday afternoon, I was the only one there, and no one else was allowed in. And I physically helped her move the boxes out of there. And I subsequently assisted her with about a month-long process of finalizing her severance. She had files on the server and so forth. And I personally delivered the last flash drive to her house on December 31st. So I did my best to facilitate it, and as far as I know, we were cordial throughout the entire thing. But I won't comment on any of the personnel aspect of it.
What's been over the last 6 years, for example, what has been the use of the facility? Has the calls been going down or up, or are they stable? Is it?
Well, I haven't been there 6 years. I've only been 2.5. That's one of the problems we have is we don't have a good database. We've just started, since I've been there, we've started recording the calls. We do know the NSPL calls. We get that from the national office on the number of calls. And there's no predictability. Well, I'll just say one thing about suicide in general. There were headlines in the paper last year when they said there was a 30% increase in suicides in Kansas, up to 505 from 300 something the year before. These numbers are all over the place. And, you know, a certified suicide is when a coroner says this was suicide. But we all know that there's suicide by cop. There are people who make accidents. It's just not accurate to say. But as far as the calls go, people ask me what's a typical night or day like. I can't tell you. There is no typical, there's no season. It isn't New Year's Day or anything. It's you pick up that phone and there's a call there. So we don't have data right now, but I'm in the process of getting that because a lot of the stuff that we're doing requires data feedback. Yes?
Steve?
This is it back there.
My name's Roy Wagner, and a little over a year ago, I rewrote the bylaws for headquarters because I was approached to be an advisor in that way. And I also know that in the bylaws, there is an annual meeting that should be in January of every year. So with the statement about never had a retreat before, I think that's inaccurate because the staff and the board and volunteers have met annually to assess the organization. Also, you know, you mentioned that grants were a waste of time, but there are still 2 years left on the current $1.3 million federal grant that's been given to headquarters, which Marcia got, for youth suicide prevention in Kansas. So that's a nice chunk of change. And also, I do know that many times Marcia approached the county for funding to be without any success. So that idea has already been approached. And in fact, I was on a couple of planning meetings with the board, and we came up with all sorts of different ways to get money besides just fundraising. And one of them was approaching the counties throughout the state, seeing if they could pay into the system since headquarters covers all the county's suicide calls. Well, it's been my understanding with nonprofits that the main purpose of the board is for fundraising. So they had these meetings, and they had a KU person come in and monitor the meetings, and nothing was done with the ideas. So you know, it to me is upsetting when the board whines about no money when they also did no fundraising efforts. So I feel like some of the information is being misconstrued. I think you have come in, Steve, and have been trying to do a good job to, like you said, pick up where you got it and go forward. And I have no problems with any of that, but I think that sometimes the public doesn't really know the information that Marcia was fired and would never have quit on her own. So for the board to present it as no fundraising was done, well, that's kind of because they didn't do any. What else do I have in my notes? And also, it's just been in the last couple of years that KU has refused to pay money for headquarters. That was what led to some of the major financial problems, is that for the last 38 years, KU helped to pay for headquarters. I'm glad that they're willing to do it again, but they had pulled out a few years ago, and they were unable to commit again. Likewise with the United Way, they cut their fundings to headquarters by several $1,000s. So I guess I'm just wanting to make sure accurate information is out there in the public.
Thank you.
Can I ask you?
Wait, I'd like to respond to her.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I went through the records, and there's no record of a real retreat for all volunteer staff and board. I did not find, I found annual meetings that were well structured. This was a real retreat. where people broke into small groups, did brainstorming, and came up with a process that the group developed itself. So this was a grassroots experience, and it was a team building. It was a team building effort. This was closure. This was important for the organization. The second thing is you're totally wrong about the Garrett Smith grant. It is not a grant to headquarters. It is not a part of our operating costs. It's a totally separate.
Exactly. It's only for the Kansas Suicide Prevention of Youth. I know it's not for
May I
headquarters
respond?
running,
May I
but it was
respond?
got
Excuse
by
me.
Marcia.
Marcia is not a part of that grant. The grant is administered by KU Med. It's housed at headquarters.
I know that.
It does nothing to our operating budget other than to provide infrastructure. It pays for the lights and the office space.
I
But that
understand
program
It
could
pays for the
leave
people who run
today
it.
and go to a university or a hospital.
Hmm?
In fact, excuse me. So the grant is totally separate. It has separately a director and an assistant director. We collaborate, we cooperate, but it does not support headquarters. They help out where they can to pay for a secretary, or they're part of the utilities, but it is not a part of that. I do not have anything to do, I don't sign their checks, I don't have anything to do with the grant, okay?
I'm aware of that, but how did we get the grant?
Well, I'll tell you how we get the grant. Let me, you want to hear about the grant? I'll tell you about the grant. We're on probation with that grant, and I attended a meeting where the administrator for the district came to us and told us headquarters should not have gotten that grant because we don't have the infrastructure to support it. Most of these grants, it's a $3 million grant over 3 years. Most of them go to hospitals or universities or facilities that have the infrastructure, the secretaries, the other folks to do it. It's been an extremely difficult grant to administer because we don't have the support of a hospital or a university. It's been a burden. And it's going to end in about 17 months, and it's not going to be renewed. That's what we know about the grant. What was, let's see, Jared, do you remember what else was? You had the retreat, the grant. Anyway.
Fundraising by the board.
Oh, fundraising by the board.
Right.
Yeah, fundraising by the board, and it hasn't been done. That's right. And I agree with you. That's a responsibility of theirs, and you know, what else?
Steve, would you characterize the volunteers? I'd like to get some understanding of who are these volunteers? Who
Okay.
are the people who do this work?
They're terrific people. You would want to invite them to dinner. I tell my friends, it's like people applied to be my friend. Here's how we get our volunteers. We have 3 informational meetings twice a year. We just had them last month. 3 informational meetings. We advertise it all over the community. People come to the informational meetings and we tell them, here's the deal. You've got to be non-judgmental. You've got to be empathetic. We can't train you in those characteristics. Otherwise, we can train you in suicide prevention and crisis intervention. Those who are interested fill out an 8-page application that asks quite a few personal questions. The application has things, well, how would you feel about this? Or how would you imagine a person would feel if they did this? And then there's at least a 1-hour interview with 2 of our current volunteers, and we all switch off on that. And where we ask more personal questions, we ask if we can do a background check, if they've had any trouble with the law, if they've had experiences with suicide attempts, suicide others, or drugs, whatever. We get very intimate in asking about their background. Those that pass the interview, we have a selection committee that meets, which consists of all the interviewing volunteers, and we offer them, those who satisfy the requirements, we offer them a chance to participate in the training. And I just trained this past weekend 15 of the spring of 14 class, and they bring a tremendous amount of experience. They're everything from KU students to retired people. Most of them are in the younger end. For years, the KU Psych Department has recommended their students take our training because KU can't offer that kind of in-crisis intervention training. In fact, just for the record, as I talked earlier about applied suicide intervention skills training, I have also trained in the community, LMH, Burt Nash, Lawrence Public Schools, Healthcare Access. We're training people who have never had training on how to intervene into a suicide. So I absolutely love the people who come to work at headquarters. They're caring, they're empathetic, they're non-judgmental. We are very welcoming. We have gay and lesbian and transgender volunteers. It's just a wonderful mix, and we all share our common concern for the safety of people at risk. Is that good enough, Austin? Yes.
Steve, part of your comments here indicate a tremendous breadth of connection with other agencies in the community, mental health, healthcare access, and so on. Could you go into that a little bit more in terms of the extent to which headquarters does connect in a significant way with other organizations in the community?
Sure. Well, first of all, you know, the United Way has quarterly meetings of the heads of all of the not-for-profits where we share and exchange ideas. And I've only been to one so far, but I found it very, very helpful. One of the things I did is that I asked the folks who attended that meeting to send me job descriptions for their executive directors so that we could hammer out one for my successor. The Douglas County Emergency Management pulls together all of the not-for-profits that are involved in, like us. So we meet, I had a meeting with Police and Fire, Humane Society. It's a disaster committee that meets, I think, every other month. But we get to give a little presentation and update on what we're doing. And I've also been personally engaged with Independence Inc., Trinity, picking their brains, sharing ideas. One of the things that I'd like to see happen, maybe after I finish as interim director, is a better coordination of the social service and emergency preparedness organizations. There seems to be some overlap, and there may be some ways to cooperate. One of the ideas is possibly we could share administrative. Maybe our offices could have office managers and one copier and one AA in a building, and it could serve several organizations. A little more efficient way of running our organizations. It seems a lot of our social service organizations are going through the same kinds of problems. There's been a tremendous amount of turnover. If you just read the paper, you can see that social service agencies, there's been a lot of turnover. One of the first meetings I had in December when I got the job was with Mike Wilgen, the permanent interim director of, I think he's been 6 or 7 organizations. And he was very helpful in giving me advice. He said, well, one thing you got going for you, Steve, is you're a short timer. You can say anything you want. And he's been right. And I've had serious talks with the board and some serious talks with the volunteers about, you know, I don't care. I mean, I'm going to be gone, but if you're going to do this, it's dumb.
Is the absence of an inpatient mental health facility in Lawrence, is that troublesome in terms of how you function, how you do your work?
Not directly, but the
Would you repeat
We
the
would
question?
do-
Some people
yeah.
wouldn't hear that question.
Sure. The lack of an inpatient facility at Lawrence Memorial Hospital, does that impact us?
For mental health.
For mental health. The most we do is we would refer people to Burt Nash. We don't take them to the hospital.
But if there was a hospital inpatient unit, would you refer them there?
Would we what there?
Would you refer them there?
Sure,
Oh, okay.
if there were. In fact, one of the conversations, I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the conversations that we've had with the police department is, I didn't know this, but the police department told us that when they have a suicide attempt, they have to stay with that person in the hospital. And one of the things that I'm working now, we've had good conversation on this, is calling for one of the headquarters volunteers to go in and talk with that. And that could save the city or county a lot of money. So we're looking into being on call and being able to provide that service for people who are brought to the hospital. Go ahead, CJ.
Well, okay, you just answered the question I had. I mean, a lot of times a person who's thinking of committing suicide, their first contact is with the police officer. And I was just wondering whether there was relationship between you and Lawrence Police, that you would be brought in very, very early in that intervention.
We're working on that. And we're also working on providing training for police officers. I think the Lawrence Police Department is very well trained compared to a lot of others. And in my personal encounters with them, I think they've got great people skills. But very few people, you'd think a physician would be able to talk to people about suicide, but they're the worst. And there are surveys to show that they are not equipped to talk. Right here.
I want to commend you for getting steady revenue streams. My observation of many charitable groups in this community, the boards wear themselves out coming up with clever fundraisers that then other groups immediately copy, which takes the steam out of their
Yep.
effort. So you're just in a constant.
Yep.
So steady streams, I highly commend you for
Thank you.
that. I do have a question of the whole group. I do not know the answer to this, but the Rice Foundation supports various groups in town.
Yep.
Could they support
Yep.
headquarters
We've
counseling?
been told about Rice and the Sunflower Foundation as well.
Yeah.
The trouble with these grants is first of all, almost all of them will not provide sustained funding. They're not going to keep the lights on. You've got to have a target population. Like if we reinstate our children's project, which we're trying to get back, that would be where we could get a grant. But the grants are for startup. They're not for keeping it going.
Yes.
That's the problem. Yes?
Are any of your staff trained in CIT, crisis intervention teams?
I'm not, and I'm not aware, that's not a part of our regimen.
A
No.
lot of police officers
Oh.
get
Yes.
that training.
We only have 7 in Lawrence. We are the least participating in the whole eastern half of Kansas. And 911 dispatchers, mental health officials, suicide prevention, I mean, the police officers, the jails, what else?
What is that?
Crisis intervention team, it's a national organization.
They do a lot of training for police officers.
Right. Yeah,
But
we
a lot
don't.
of training for anybody dealing with mental
Oh, yeah.
health. So I would highly suggest that some of the staff, partake in that training.
We'll see how it fits into, the demands of our clients. Yes?
What about people who lose their temper, who habitually get mad at other people and sometimes attack them?
Uh-huh.
Can you do anything about those people?
Well, we train our counselors to deal with difficult people. And we have protocols for dealing with abusive callers and abusive clients. I mean, there are different boundaries that we set. So our training isn't just to sit there and be a punching bag. Well, Alan, you've exceeded the limits here. I think you're stepping over my boundaries. I'm going to end this call or end this visit.